There are many quotes attributed to Napoleon that amount to something like, never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake. And that's how I feel about a particular brand of feminist when they have the opportunity to out themselves. Enter Mona Eltahawy. Yeah, that'll do. On the Australian taxpayer-funded broadcaster's flagship show, Q&A.
We've got many questions to get through, and this one sort of flows. The next question comes from Murray Saunders.
Thanks, Fran. When trying to bring about significant change, when is aggression and violence a better option than assertiveness, strong arguments, and modelling the behaviour you expect of others?
Ashton?
When none of that other stuff works.
It's as simple as that?
Yep.
I have a great answer for this that a lot of people do not like. I want patriarchy to fear feminism. And there is a chapter in my book on violence. There is a chapter on my book about white women who voted for Trump and white women who accept crumbs from patriarchy because they allow their whiteness to trump their gender. I'm fully aware of this. But at the end of the day, even those white women have to recognize that nothing protects them from patriarchy. Nothing. For me, as a feminist, the most important thing is to destroy patriarchy. And all of this talk about how if you talk about violence, you're just becoming like the men. My question, so your question is a really important one, but I'm going to answer it with another question. How long must we wait for men and boys to stop murdering us, to stop beating us, and to stop raping us? How many rapists must we kill? Not the state, because I disagree with the death penalty, and I want to get rid of incarceration, and I'm with you on the police. So I want women themselves. As a woman, I'm asking, how many rapists must we kill until men stop raping us?
Now, before we dissect that incoherent barrage of bullshit, let's remind those of us who are familiar with this show and inform those that aren't how Q&A describes itself. Q&A is a television discussion program that focuses mostly on politics but ranges across all of the big issues that set Australians thinking, talking and debating. It is driven by interaction. Q&A provides a rare opportunity for Australian citizens to directly question and hold to account politicians and key opinion leaders in a national public forum, and Q&A is broadcast live so that not only the studio audience but also the wider audience can get involved. We aim to create a discussion that is constructive, that reflects a diverse range of views, and that provides a safe environment where people can respectfully discuss their differences. So, what did not happen in this show? Well, Mona, and what an appropriate name given the amount of hysterical moaning she does, was not held to account for any of the batshit crazy things she said. And there was not a diverse range of views, just a lot of head nodding in agreement. The only slight bit of pushback, if you could call it that, was this from host Fran Kelly.
So, Mona, them's fighting words. Spectator Australia is already saying Mona's promoting violence. Mm-hmm. That's what you're doing?
What Kelly was referring to there was the fact that Corinne Barraclough, always worth a read, actually called it before it happened in an article in The Spectator on the day the program was set to air with the title, "Why is the ABC Justifying Violence?" Tonight, our national broadcaster will take a step too far. It will lose all right to pretend that it's unbiased or balanced, and it will let go of any last ounce of respect that it may have been clinging to. Egyptian-American journalist Mona Eltahawy will be a panellist on Q&A, hosted for the night by Fran Kelly. Eltahawy speaks about using justifiable violence against men under the mythical righteous challenge of dismantling the patriarchy, which, as you saw, is exactly what happened. And it's not as if Fran Kelly is some shrinking violet. She's quite happy to mix it up with politicians on the ABC's political show, The Insiders. Now, I don't want to waste too much time on the illogical, confused nonsense spouted by female Sideshow Bob, but let's just consider some of the non-points that were made. I want patriarchy to fear feminism. Well, given that the patriarchy doesn't exist, it won't really care. But of course, I would say that, wouldn't I? Because I benefit from patriarchy, and therefore any denial of its existence is just further evidence that it's real. But if by patriarchy you mean the fact that positions of power, such as politicians and CEOs, are predominantly male, then why would you want it to fear you? It already bends over backwards to accommodate the hysterical rantings of feminists. Whether that's the family court system, the hundreds of millions spent on violence against women campaigns, virtue signalling corporations buying into female oppression narratives around the wage gap. If the patriarchy is oppressing women, it's doing an awful job.
There's a chapter on my book about white women who voted for Trump and white women who accept crumbs from patriarchy because they allow their whiteness to trump their gender. I'm fully aware of this. But at the end of the day, even those white women have to recognize that nothing protects them from patriarchy. Nothing. For me, as a feminist, the most important thing is to destroy patriarchy. And all of this talk about how if you talk about violence, you're just becoming like the men. My question, so your question is a really important one, but I'm going to answer it with another question. How long must we wait for men and boys to stop murdering us, to stop beating us, and to stop raping us? How many rapists must we kill? Not the state, because I disagree with the death penalty, and I want to get rid of incarceration, and I'm with you on the police. So I want women themselves. As a woman, I'm asking, how many rapists must we kill until men stop raping us?
Now let's put aside the overt racism about references to white women and the complete lack of evidence for the claim that they benefit from the mythical patriarchy. Instead, she decided to completely ignore the question and then ask her own unbelievably ridiculous one. So she wants to do away with the police. She doesn't believe in incarceration, but wants to know how many rapists, and note she includes boys, who we must remember are all potential rapists, do we need to kill for women to stop being murdered and raped. This doesn't make any sense on any level until you understand that what you are watching is a performance. This is not a person to be taken seriously. This is an exercise in attention seeking. She's a troll, and you have to admit she's pretty good at it because she has generated plenty of attention. Brendan O'Neill in The Australian also noted the performative aspect of Eltahawy's comments. Eltahawy is playing at being oppressed. She's donning the garb of the downtrodden to distract attention from the fact that she's had a very nice, comfortable and, dare I say it, privileged life. Consider her Q&A comments on Barack Obama's sensible criticisms of woke culture and the trend for cancelling people who hold different views to our own. Eltahawy slammed Obama. She said she often went online precisely to say, fuck off. Cringe to people who criticise her. She said, I do not have the luxury or the privilege to sit there and be civil with people who do not acknowledge my full humanity. In short, she's a member of the non-privileged and therefore she is good and you must listen to her. There's only one problem with this. It isn't true. Eltahawy has had a privileged life, and I'm using the word privilege in its true sense here. She grew up in a middle-class family in Egypt. Her parents had PhDs. They worked in medicine. They even got government grants to study and work overseas, including in Britain and Saudi Arabia. A third of Egyptians live in extreme poverty. In contrast to them, Eltahawy grew up in great comfort. And that's an inconvenient fact for someone who's super keen to be a member of the woke, where being oppressed gives you moral power and social influence. So woke Mona must pose as someone who lacks luxury or privilege and who cannot be expected to be polite to her detractors. This is a woke form of blacking up, where middle-class people self-identify, to use politically correct language, as oppressed to improve their social standing in PC circles, and gives them the right to lecture the rest of us, especially white men, about how dumb and prejudiced we are. In short, she's a charlatan. And here's the segment of the show where she explains why she can't be expected to be respectful and civil.
You know, this idea of respectability, this idea of civility, this idea of unity, all of these words, decorum, who invented those words? Those words were invented by white men for the benefit of other white men in systems and institutions that were always designed to be for white men. And they weren't designed for women like you and me and so many others. Like you said, people of color and gender diverse people. They never imagined us in those spaces. And then we show up and we just ruin it for them.
Respectability, civility and decorum are words created by white men and are used to exclude minority voices like hers. You could be forgiven for thinking this woman has had a full-blown lobotomy. The reason civility, respectability and decorum are important is because that's how you engage in fruitful conversations and debates between people with different views. Otherwise, you get people shouting at one another and potentially violent conflict. But of course, that's all a smokescreen. Sideshow Bobina doesn't want civility because a civil conversation with decorum in which ideas are discussed and challenged would reveal her positions to be utterly vacuous and without merit. She just wants to assert truths and then claim that anyone that calls her out on her lack of decorum and incivility has just internalised the rules of the system that denies her a voice and is further evidence of the oppressive white supremacist patriarchal system. Or in other words, it's just another illogical circular argument. Now, after 53 formal complaints to the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the ABC decided to pull the show from all their platforms and investigate whether it breached their editorial standards. After a flood of complaints about Monday's program, ABC Managing Director David Anderson on Thursday conceded elements may have been offensive. Q&A has always sought to tackle difficult issues and present challenging and thought-provoking content. However, I can understand why some viewers found elements of this episode confronting or offensive. We have received audience complaints about the program and are assessing the concerns raised and will investigate whether the program met the ABC's editorial standards. Now, I couldn't give a shit if someone found this offensive. As I said, I think it's good to have idiots like this on national television. Sunlight is the best disinfectant for bad ideas. And modern-day feminism is a cavalcade of wacky theories and bad ideas. And Mona isn't an outlier. She spouts mainstream feminist thought, demonstrated by the fact that none of the other feminists on the stage pushed back for even a second. They just happily nodded along. The issue for me as a taxpayer that unwillingly contributes funding to this organisation is that not only did they violate the principles of their own show, they violated their organisational charter to be independent and free from bias. Where was the political diversity here? You couldn't invite a single conservative female voice on to push back on this mutual admiration society? Interestingly, the host Fran Kelly appears to be faking some introspection into her role in this shit show, although it sounds more like blame shifting. Speaking exclusively to Diary, Kelly says she should have immediately taken on Eltahawy's claim. I needed to challenge the assertion that killing man is the answer to violence against women. I thought there would be a range of views on this panel. As it turned out, there was not a lot of disagreement on the panel, and it was up to me to challenge Mona Eltahawy's assertion. Kelly admits she was caught out by the fact panellists did not quickly contradict Eltahawy's assertion. When the panel didn't disavow that call, it was my job, and in a fast-paced and furious discussion, I missed that opportunity. Despite this, Kelly believes the discussion about violence against women is an important national conversation. Police in this country are called to a domestic violence incident every 2 minutes. The level of violence against women in our community needs to be discussed, confronted, and addressed. Well, given that violence against men is more prevalent, when will that be discussed, confronted and addressed? Probably not on Q&A anytime soon. Now, if you needed any further evidence that Sideshow Bobina has odious views, then surely the endorsement of Australia's #1 man-hating feminist Cuntentine Ford puts the final nail in the coffin. And yes, I did say Cuntentine, and if you have a problem with that, tell someone who gives a shit. You cunt. And not only does the perennial Mona have batshit crazy theories about patriarchy, she has some advice for straight males.
I'm just going to tell you what I've learned as I've gotten older, because I'm 52 years old. The older I get, the queerer I am. And my partner is a bisexual man. And I'm urging the cis straight men out there, there is something deeply broken in you and in the way that you move through the world. As you get older, learn from people like us so that this can be a better world. Be queerer. Be more bisexual. Be less cisgendered in the way that you move through the world. Just fuck it all up and be free.
So basically we've done a full 180. Once upon a time, being gay or bisexual made you some kind of sexual deviant. There was something wrong with you. But now, thankfully, we've largely overcome that prejudice. So much so that in the world, according to Mona, being a straight male is the problem. You need to embrace your queerness. But don't despair, I have left the best comment for last, and proof that not everything, she says, is nonsensical gibberish.
I have no fucking idea.
Now that's a comment I wholeheartedly agree with. As usual, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'll see you next time.